The slave mind. Men have been indoctrinated from cradle to campus to corporate office. Social media, the news, school, and even parents limiting beliefs all work together to create a slave like mode of being that beats down a man's potential until he has nothing left but depression and compliance. Traditionally, a man had to be independent, stand on his own, make his own decisions, and chart his own course. Now, men are told to seek approval for everything they think, say, and do. They are expected to sit down, shut up, and step out of the spotlight. Society creates slaves. When I mention slave mind, I'm referring to the social and pseudo-intellectual indoctrination program foisted on men from the schooling system to the corporate office. The slave mind tells men what they ought to be and pushes them, sometimes through coercion, to forget what they are at their biological core. The results? Men suffer from symptoms of identity suppression. No self-esteem, sometimes even self-hate. Jealousy of others' lives because they despise their own. Low motivation and energy to do hard things. Constant shame for wanting more. Feeling lost, angry, frustrated, and hopeless. A deep void of emptiness that won't go away. An unexplained fear of stepping against the grain. Lies, lies, and more lies. A modern myth has emerged about how to be a man. You know it's a myth because when you apply it, you don't get results. This myth tells you to deny your natural drive for competence and success, to be more placid and appropriate and more feminine. The indoctrination starts young, in schools, movies, ads, universities, and social media. Most young men today live their most valuable years on screen instead of in the real world. They exist in an institution or a fantasy world where they feel like they belong rather than reality, where they feel rejected and out of place. The decline of men. Symptoms of the slave mind. 1. Record low testosterone. Testosterone levels in young men today are lower than those of their grandfathers. This biochemical shift is catastrophic because testosterone regulates emotion, health, and brain function. A longitudinal study showed a 1% decline in average testosterone levels among US men per year. If you're a man with low testosterone, you just don't feel well. And if you don't feel well, you can't perform at a high level. Low testosterone leads to low to no sex drive, erectile dysfunction, health issues, brain fog, fatigue, lower muscle mass, and strength. Number 2, identity collapse. Men used to be protectors and providers. Now, society tells men their role is obsolete. So what's a man's purpose in the 21st century? Who knows? The slave mode forces men into roles they hate with no deep masculine payoff. They don't feel needed, wanted, or useful. Interestingly, men are diagnosed with depression at lower rates than women, but have higher rates of suicide, substance abuse, and violent behavior when they're depressed. When a man feels his identity is lost, he is more likely to take lethal action instead of seeking help. Number 3, no deep friendships. Most men today don't have a true friend they can call during tough times. Instead, they have fair weather or online friends, people they've never even met. Every man needs a friend who would fly across the world to bail him out of jail, but that kind of brotherhood is dying. There's also a lack of male-only spaces. Boys used to have dedicated places where they could wrestle, compete, and provoke each other to test themselves and grow. Now those spaces are being erased under the guise of inclusivity. Even the Boy Scouts was nearly dismantled. Once girls enter these spaces, boys have to tone down, play small, and comply with feminized values. Women birth boys, but men raise men. When you introduce women into sacred masculine spaces, you weaken what makes them powerful. Any man who has ever been at a social gathering knows this. Men behave one way in front of the women, and differently when it's just men. Raw masculine energy can only be expressed and disciplined among men. Number 4, lack of sex and intimacy. One recent survey found that 28% of men under 30 years old reported no sex in the past year, triple the figure from 2008. Social disconnection, porn consumption, and fear of rejection or cancellation have driven many men into virtual escapism. Young men today are avoiding women more than ever before. They're not dating, having sex, or pursuing relationships. Instead, they escape into porn and video games. Look, no judgment, I was there too. I once published an article titled, Why Young Men Don't Have Sex No More. It was about a guy I knew who hadn't had sex in 4 years. Most women in the comment section didn't believe it. They assumed men were having sex all the time. Some men in the comment section denied that sex was important at all, which is a blatant lie told to be appropriate and inflate one's own perceived value. One commenter said, aiming this at me, "You're a significant part of the problem if you think he's not, at 23, having intercourse with women he has no idea whether he wants to commit to or not. This culture is absolutely cooked." He was right. The culture is cooked, but what he didn't realize is that while women are the gatekeepers of sex, men are the gatekeepers of relationships. Men have always optimized for sexual access. Women have always optimized for relationship potential. To deny this is to live in a fairy tale where you get to impose what you deem masculine and feminine impulses should be, instead of accepting what really is. When you deal with what is, you can strive for a win-win between men and women, so they both get what they truly want and value from each other. Number 5, low to no ambition. Men today are falling behind. They're dropping out of university, failing in the workforce, and not striving for success like previous generations. They're becoming slow, fat, and lazy. But you can't completely blame them. They're looking around at a world that demonizes them, and they're wondering, what's the damn point? They don't have a clear role they can own in society anymore, so they feel useless and forgotten. Men feel unheard and unloved, as if they're the scum of the earth. So when you tell them it's toxic to be ambitious and competitive, you are taking away the only vehicle that raises their value, which delivers confidence and self-esteem. We live at a time where men aren't allowed to take credit for anything, and they are looked on with disgust if they're proud of any male attribute or historical figure. If you were to say to the average person, "Look around, everything you see was built by a man," you'd get a scowl and be called a misogynist. But if you were to say, "Look around, everyone you see was birthed by a woman," you'd get cheers. Why the double standard? As society becomes more feminized, it becomes anti-masculine, and then it becomes anti-male. There's a cultural belief that men have all the rights, power, and privilege, so they deserve to be treated like shit. Therefore, men are now 85% of the homeless. They're twice as likely to be alcoholics, 2 to 3 times more likely to develop gambling disorders, 93% of federal prisoners, and 89% of jail inmates. They are 77% of homicides and 79% of suicides. This isn't by accident. It's the result of an intentional weakening of masculinity. It was engineered by ideologies, movements, and policies that undermined the very traits that made men strong, capable, and sovereign. Here's how it unfolded. The Frankfurt School and Cultural Marxism. In the 1930s, a group of German intellectuals, i.e. the Frankfurt School, fled Nazi Germany with a new ideological weapon, critical theory. Their goal was to deconstruct the traditional pillars of Western civilization, which were family, religion, and masculinity, by framing them as sources of oppression. Instead of class struggle, rich versus poor, they shifted the battle to identity struggle. Men versus women, white versus black, straight versus gay. Masculinity naturally became a target because it symbolized hierarchy, order, and strength, which were all enemies of the critical revolution. Masculinity was now a disease to be cured. Then we had radical feminism, second and third waves. The first wave of feminism fought for rights like voting, education, and legal equality. No argument there, but the second and third waves between 1960 and 1990, the movement shifted into something different. It wasn't about equality anymore, but about resentment. Masculinity itself was branded as oppressive. Competition, assertiveness, leadership, ambition, all core male values were recast as toxic, dangerous, and outdated. Boys were told to reject their instincts and shrink. Girls were encouraged to climb higher. And so an entire generation of men grew up ashamed of their natural impulses. Then, feminization of education. Modern schooling, especially after the 1970s, became increasingly feminized in its structure. Sit still, be quiet, don't be aggressive, talk about your feelings, conform to groupthink. Natural male traits like risk taking, independence, rough play, these were all discouraged or actively punished. Boys were diagnosed with ADHD and drugged into compliance. Millions of boys grew up believing there was something wrong with them because they couldn't sit still and learn like girls. Number 6, the lack of masculine role models. Masculine role models used to be everywhere. Fathers, grandfathers, uncles, coaches, warriors, and leaders. Young men grew up watching strong, disciplined men navigate life with purpose and conviction. Today, the role models are gone. And what's replaced them? A society that tells men to be weak, passive, and ashamed for their nature. Boys are growing up without strong men around them, so they turn to social media influences, celebrities, or worse, ideologies that tell them masculinity is toxic and that they should be more soft, agreeable, and apologetic for their own existence. The results? A generation of men who are lost, depressed, and completely disconnected from their masculine core. The fatherless epidemic. A boy's first role model should be his father, but fatherless homes are skyrocketing. Studies show that boys raised without a father are more likely to struggle academically, develop emotional instability, engage in crime or substance abuse, lack confidence and a sense of purpose. The sexual revolution and no-fault divorce laws in the 1960s and 70s made it easier than ever for families to disintegrate. This leaves us with an epidemic of father-free homes and fatherless boys. Around 1 in 4 children now grow up without a father present. Weak role models create weak men. The men who do exist in young boys' lives, like teachers, mentors, media figures, these guys are typically soft, passive, and feminized. They teach boys to be nice, never be aggressive, and to suppress their natural male instincts. The real masculine role models, the ones who preach strength, leadership, and dominance, they get silenced, cancelled, and demonized. Why? Because a strong man is dangerous. A strong man thinks for himself, stands his ground, and cannot be controlled. The rise of artificial masculinity. When young men lack strong male role models, they seek guidance elsewhere. And that's where the problem starts. Instead of learning from real battle-tested men, they turn to fake alpha influences, pushing an extreme one-dimensional view of masculinity. Hollywood's weak, bumbling portrayals of men who are either incompetent or sick and twisted villains, or pundits and institutions that tell them to be soft, compliant, and ashamed. You may be angry hearing this, maybe even a little depressed, but thankfully there's an answer to this mess. If you grew up without a strong role model, you must become one. A generation of fatherless, weak men doesn't happen by accident. It's by design and set up to indoctrinate men into compliance. The truth is, no one is coming to save you. It's up to you to step up, reclaim your masculine power, and become the role model you wish you had. The king mentality versus slave mentality. The world is divided into 2 types of men, kings and slaves. One takes control, the other waits for permission. One commands, the other obeys. The difference is in mentality. A king mentality is built on strength, power, and ownership. A slave mentality is ruled by fear, dependence, and submission. Throughout history, we've seen both men who rose to lead and men who accept their chains. Which one will you be? A man with a king mentality seeks to dominate his reality. He doesn't ask what he deserves. Instead, he takes what he earns. He sets the rules for himself, moves with purpose, and refuses to be ruled by his own weakness or the weakness of others. A king thinks in terms of generations, not just today. He builds, he leads, he conquers. This is a stark contrast to a man with a slave mentality. He waits, he obeys, and he accepts whatever life gives him without question. He's a victim, always blaming, always complaining, and never taking control. Here's a historical warning. How Rome enslaved its weak. Rome didn't respect weakness. If you surrendered, you became a slave. If you lacked strength, discipline, and ambition, you were owned. Roman slavery was mental as much as physical. Slaves accepted their fate, lived at the mercy of their masters, and never fought back. Slaves in Rome were stripped of their personal identities, often renamed and subjected to branding or specific dress codes that marked their low status. This process led to what scholars term social death, a condition where slaves were denied an independent social identity and were seen solely as extensions of their masters. This dehumanization was both a tool of control and a means to reinforce the hierarchical structure of Roman society. The psychological impact of this condition was profound. The constant dehumanization, lack of autonomy, and ever-present threat of punishment took a toll on the mental well-being of slaves. The social stigma attached to slavery further reinforced their inferior status, leading to feelings of worthlessness and hopelessness. Any resistance was squashed severely. The Spartacus Revolt in 73 to 71 BCE, one of the most significant slave uprisings, slaves were brutally suppressed to set an example and deter such events from happening again. No one respects a slave. This is the slave mentality today. Passivity, waiting for life to change instead of forcing change. Dependency, needing others for validation or purpose. Fear, avoiding challenges because failure is terrifying. Stuckness, a lack of individual agency and willpower. A slave lets life happen to him. A king makes life happen for him. So if you're a man who wants a king mentality, you have to choose it every minute you're awake. Sadly, there is no other way.